get into that. No, we won't get into the free will versus predestination, because that's a topic for a totally different thing. But the whole thing is the freedom is exactly that. You don't have free will, you're slaves. If you're not, you'll explain it better than I can.
Where do we want this? Mackenzie has suggested right here.
Yeah. It's not the priest, though.
It's not somebody else.
Something not the priest.
No, I took them out and put them in their place.
I'm trying to crank that way up.
All right.
Yeah, like,
From an unlikely source. I don't even know who wrote these lyrics. I've been thinking about religion.
Good.
I've been thinking about the things that we believe. I've been thinking about the Bible. I've been thinking about Adam and Eve. I've been thinking about the garden. I've been thinking about the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. I've been thinking about forbidden fruit. I've been thinking about a man and his wife. I've been thinking about sacred love. Anybody know who wrote that song? Sting. See, these things are in the human heart. These longings, these questions, this ache that we've been talking about. And part and parcel of these big questions is the question of human freedom. What is freedom? Our culture talks a big line about freedom, especially sexual freedom, sexual liberation. But what does the culture mean by sexual freedom or sexual liberation? You tell me. What does the culture mean? Do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, with whomever you want, without ever saying no. I want to challenge this idea. Is that freedom? Is never saying no to your urge to merge freedom? If your hormones are in control of you and you're not in control of them, are you free? Is an alcoholic who cannot say no to his next drink free? Or rather, is he in chains? I would submit to you for your consideration that what the culture promotes as sexual freedom is in fact the sure path to sexual addiction. I'd also submit to you that we have three choices with our desire. We talked about the fast food menu, we talked about that starvation diet, and we talked about the banquet. We could also put it this way. We will become one of the following three, or maybe some combination thereof. An addict, a stoic, or a mystic. Let's define our terms here. If we take our desire for the infinite to finite things, things that are limited, we're created for something unlimited, for a love that lasts forever. And if we turn to finite things, if we use our freedom and say, this finite thing right here is what I'm going to use and take and grasp a hold of to satisfy my desire, I go to something that is finite to satisfy a desire for the infinite. It doesn't satisfy. So what do I think I need? More of it. And so I go and I get more of it, and it still doesn't satisfy. So what do I think I need? More of it, and more of it, and more of it. That is the journey of the addict. The Stoic, you know what Stoicism is? It's this idea that desire and passion is bad, and we just need to put a lid on it. The Stoic is someone who doesn't feel much. He doesn't have desire. He does, but he just represses it. That's what I've been calling the starvation diet. But the mystic is one who uses his or her freedom to open up to that eternal banquet of love. And that's what gives our freedom meaning. I want to show you what the Catechism says here about freedom. Look at quote 1c. The exercise of freedom does not imply a right to say or do everything. And then John Paul II puts it this way. He says, freedom exists for a reason. It exists for the sake of love. If freedom is not taken advantage of by love, freedom itself becomes a negative thing and gives human beings a feeling of emptiness. Man longs for love more than for freedom. See, freedom is not an end in itself. Freedom is a means to what? Love. Freedom is the means, and love is the end. We are given freedom by God as the capacity to love. Listen to what Bruce Springsteen says. This is a quote from him at a concert he gave, I think, in the late 80s. And it was his introduction to one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs, Born to Run. And he said, talking about the song where he puts this guy and a girl in a car and they're off on this grand adventure. They're searching for the meaning of freedom. He says, I realize that in the end, individual freedom, when it is not connected to some sort of community or friends or the world outside, it ends up feeling pretty meaningless. Freedom is meaningless unless we are using our freedom to learn how to love. This is what distinguishes us from the animals, in fact. We have freedom, free will. Animals are ruled by instinct, but we can actually choose. But as the prophet William Wallace put it, what will you do with your freedom? We have fate. We see right in the first pages of Genesis that this gift of freedom, which comes from God, puts us in a battle between good and evil. Very important here that we do not confuse freedom with license. Let's take a look at this chart here at the bottom of page 9. The difference between license and freedom. License says, do whatever feels good. If it feels good, do it. Freedom says, authentic freedom, do whatever is good.
Listen to these distinctions.
License says, freedom, we should use it to indulge our compulsions. But authentic freedom is not the freedom to indulge your compulsions. Rather, authentic freedom is freedom from the compulsion to indulge. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this point. The difference between freedom from the compulsion to indulge and freedom to indulge compulsion. Everybody with me there? This story will unfold it. Now, when I was a teenager in the late 80s, I thought I was free in this relationship I had with this girl because I had tossed off the oppressive shackles of my Catholic upbringing and I was indulging my lust with my girlfriend whenever I wanted. I thought I was free. I thought I was sexually liberated. And I'll never forget when I realized I was not free, I was in chains. I was addicted. Now, believe it or not, even though I was sexually active as a teenager, I still had some semblance of Christian faith, and my conscience would sometimes kick in, and I'd feel guilty about this sexual relationship. And one Lent, Catholics are supposed to give stuff up for Lent, right? So I said to my girlfriend, why don't we give up sex for Lent? No, just a side note. Let me point out that you're not supposed to give up sin for Lent, right? You're supposed to give that up all the time, right? You're supposed to give up good stuff for Lent, right? Like beer. But this is where I was at the time, so I said to my girlfriend, let's give up sex for Lent. She agreed. Guess how long I lasted? Any guesses? A day. What do you think? What do you think I am? It was 2 days. No, in all honesty, it was like 2 or 3 days. That's all I could last. And I realized then I was not free. I was in chains. I could not say no. And very painfully, I learned this principle. If you cannot control your own desires, you will seek to control others to satisfy your desires. Because my girlfriend wasn't always interested in sex when I was. So what did I do? Manipulated her into getting what I want out of her. I am not proud of this in the least. It caused her and myself a lot of pain. And if you've listened to some of my other talks, perhaps you've heard me say this before, but it bears repeating. As a representative of the male side of the human race, I need to say to every one of my sisters here and everybody watching on video, I am so sorry for the ways that my lusts and the lusts of other men have wounded you. If you've been in that place where a guy is manipulating you to get something out of you, you know that pain, and I'm so sorry. We're not meant to use and manipulate one another. We're meant to learn how to love one another, but we can't do that unless we're free. Freedom to love. If we don't have freedom, we can't love. And, please don't let it be thought that I think this is only a guy's problem. A woman could just as well stand up here and apologize to all the men, but that's not my job. Guys, I'm so sorry for the... It's not my job. But we need to take an honest look, all of us, men and women, at the ways we have not been free as we're called to be free. And heck, I'm not perfectly free. I got a long way to go. But I remember some key stages in my life where I started to enter into authentic freedom. I'll never forget this experience. Oh my gosh. My now wife, this was 1995, we were dating, and we knew it was just a matter of time before we were going to be husband and wife. And I'll never forget this experience. We were sitting on a cliff looking over the beautiful river, and the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, the birds are singing. It's just a gorgeous day, and I'm holding this gorgeous woman in my arms. And I just wanted to love her. I just wanted to tell her how good she was. And I had a flashback to the way I used to operate when I was a man on a mission, not a mission of love, but a mission of lust. And I became a professional manipulator. I knew how to push my old girlfriend's buttons to get what I wanted out of her. And I had this flashback when I was with my soon-to-be wife. And between these two relationships is when I discovered theology of the body and started growing in authentic freedom, and a lot of inner work was going on, a lot of healing was taking place. So I'd come a fair distance at this point, and I was holding her, had this flashback, and I just went, and Wendy said, what? I said, Wendy, I have no desire whatsoever to push your buttons. And she said, well, good. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't want to use you. I don't want to manipulate you. I don't want to try to get something out of you. Good. No, you don't get it. I mean, I used to be so bound by my lust. I am experiencing a new freedom. I don't want to use you. I just want to love you. Good. I was so free. I thought I could fly. I thought I could jump off that cliff and fly. That is freedom. It's not the freedom to indulge your compulsions. It's freedom from the compulsion to indulge so that you can actually choose to love. And to choose to love that person means to affirm that person as a person, not an object for my pleasure. License promotes a freedom to sin, but authentic freedom is freedom from sin. License, indulging your compulsions, negates love. Freedom is what affords love. Look here also at the chart. License sees the law of love as the enemy, as a tyrant, as an imposition. Remember my attitude? I had tossed off the oppressive shackles of my Catholic upbringing. See, when we're bound by lust, the law of love that tells us not to indulge our lust feels like a burden on us, doesn't it? And we think freedom is to get rid of the law. see, in the beginning, when they were drunk on God's wine, remember that expression? Here was God's law of love, and here was the human heart. There was a perfect unity between God's law of love and what they desired. But here's what happened when we ran out of wine. There's a terrible rupture now between the law of love and what goes on in our hearts. And we have to narrow this gap, right? So often we think the way to narrow the gap is to bring God's laws down to the level of our own weakness and disordered desire. And we think we'll be free if we just get rid of God's law, so I can do whatever I want. That's not freedom. What if there is a power available to all of us that enabled us to narrow the gap in the other direction, where our hearts were more and more conformed to God's law of love? Then the law would be written on our hearts, and the law would not feel like a burden any longer. It would well up from within. That day I was holding Wendy, my soon-to-be wife, in my arms. I wasn't thinking, well, I'd really like to use you as an object for my pleasure, but the Pope says I shouldn't. So, darn it all. No. I was free. I wanted to love. Nobody was telling me. I wanted it. It was welling up from the depths of my heart. No human being is so free as the one who sees what is true, good, and beautiful and desires it with all of his or her heart. That's freedom. The whole New Testament is devoted to this kind of freedom. Not freedom to break the law, but freedom to fulfill the law, because our hearts don't desire to break it. Pick any teaching of the Catholic Church that you're bitter about. 99.999% chance it has something to do with sex. I mean, come on, be honest. We're not bitter that the Catholic Church says we should feed hungry people, right? Who is the Catholic Church telling me I should feed hungry people? No, but when, we're dealing with some deeper stuff that actually challenges me to grow and look at the way I live my life, we start getting, hey, who's the Catholic Church? Stay out of my bedroom.
Don't tell me I can't eat meat on Fridays.
But what if in fact the church is simply saying, look, we need to let go of the greasy chicken nuggets. Not so that we fall into starvation, not so we fall into emptiness, but so that we can come into the banquet. If the church's teaching on love is here, and our hearts are over here, and I'm not here to shove this down anybody's throat, we're going to talk about, this is not an imposition, it's a proposition. I respect your freedom to reject everything I'm saying as a bunch of ridiculous religious nonsense. If that's the way you really feel about it, I honor you there. I respect your freedom. I'm not here to shove anything down your throat. But this is a proposal. So I ask only that you think on it, chew on it, even pray on it. If the church's law of love is here and our hearts are over here, maybe the problem is not with the church's law of love. Maybe the problem is just what Jesus said it was, our own hardness of heart. And maybe the solution is not to water down the law of love, but to get on our knees and say, dear God, please change my heart. If God can change my heart, I'm telling you, he can change anybody's heart. Not that he's changed it perfectly. I still got a long way to go, but I'm on the journey. You see, with license, the law feels imposed, as I say in the chart here. But with true freedom, the law is written on the heart. License says, do whatever I want. Freedom says, do whatever God wants, because that's what I want. License says, any choice is a good choice. Isn't that the whole pro-choice mantra in our culture? Any choice is a good choice. Do even the pro-choice people think this? Do they really think any choice is a good choice? Who is going to call the bluff on this? Nobody really believes any choice is a good choice. Molesting children, I don't see how anybody can say this is a good choice. Rape, I don't see how anybody can say this is a good choice. To be authentically, this is the key word, authentically for choice. Everybody with me? Pro-choice. See, the culture uses this expression, but you mean something very distorted by it. It means any choice is a good choice. Murdering life in the womb is a good choice. Whoa, 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 whoa. Christians are not anti-choice. We are saying, let's choose rightly. Are you with me here? Freedom is a choice between good and evil. And we are not free to invent good and evil. Turn with me to the next page. It's so important that we know freedom is God's gift to us. God gave us freedom. So if we are to reclaim the language here, let's not surrender that beautiful word choice to the culture. No wonder they use this word, because it's a very potent word. And who wants to be robbed of their freedom? Are you with me here? So I know that the culture uses this phrase in a distorted way, but I'm going to reclaim it for truth. Who gave us freedom? Who gave us the capacity to choose? God. So in this sense, can't we say, reclaiming the language, God is pro-choice. But here's the bumper sticker I want to see. God is pro-choice, but some choices are always wrong. Choose rightly. The Christian faith is not saying, we got to take away your freedom. No, the Christian faith is saying, we got to use our freedom rightly. Which means, bottom of page 10, freedom must respect truth. There is a profound interrelationship between freedom and truth. And as John Paul II says, 2a, truth and freedom either go together hand in hand, or together they perish in misery. If freedom does not respect the truth about good and evil, the truth about the dignity of every human being, the truth about the order of the universe, there's an objective order to the universe that we don't make up. And anybody who wants to deny that, I'm sorry, they're just not looking at reality. Let me give you a little demonstration here. Suppose this is poison, okay? But I don't know it's poison, and I drink it. Have I committed suicide? No, because I didn't know it was poison. But will it still kill me? Yes, because whether I know it's poison or not, or think it's poison or not, has no bearing whatsoever on whether it is poison or not. Are you following me there? And out of love for me, if you know it's poison and I don't, and you see me going to drink it, what's the loving thing to do? Poison. How dare you impose your morality on me? That might be poison for you, but that's not poison for me. Does that make any sense? You see, this is the point. Truth exists. And we don't make it up. It exists independent of what we think or know about it. Now, people will often say, oh, there is no truth. To which I respond, is that true? Well, if there's truth, you can't know it. How do you know? Well, you can't be sure. Are you sure? It's a crazy thing. In our very attempt to deny the truth, we acknowledge it. Because if it's true that there's no truth, then it's false that there's no truth because it's true that there's no truth. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Are you following me? I'm not even sure I just followed what I said. But nonetheless, I think it's true. I'm getting at the relationship here, or trying anyway, hopefully successfully, the relationship between truth and freedom. They stand together or they fall together. If freedom does not respect the truth, the real order of the universe, then in the name of freedom, I may be drinking poison and killing myself. Freedom is not the freedom to make up my own vision of reality. Freedom is given me to acknowledge reality exists apart from what I think about it. And I have the opportunity to use my freedom either to enter into what is real or to reject it. But look at how crazy our world has become. Look at the bottom of page 10 at quote 2C. This is from the U.S. Supreme Court. And this is the logic that has been used to justify abortion. Listen to this. At the heart of liberty, we could also say at the heart of freedom, is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. Really? Am I free to invent reality? Okay, my reality is that I don't like you. I don't like your shirt. In fact, I hate people who wear this kind of shirt. And it's different than mine. Don't tell me it's the same. Because I hate people who wear this kind of shirt, and I'm just going to slit your throat. Because I don't like you. I don't like the color of your skin. I don't like the way you do your hair. You are in my way. Get rid of you. That's my concept of reality. And according to the U.S. Supreme Court, I am free to define it however I so choose. Come on, folks. Who is going to call this bluff? But now we have a further question we have to really look at and explore. If we are to acknowledge that truth is real, if we are to acknowledge that there is some objective order of things that we all must respect, then how do we know what the truth is? Now, this is the boldest of boldest things that anybody could have ever said. There was a guy, flesh and blood guy, who walked this earth 2,000 years ago, who claimed not only that there is truth, but that he's it. I am the truth. What? This idea, and it's a nice way to get ourselves off the hook from taking Jesus seriously, but it's really a cop-out. C.S. Lewis, I think, was the one who pointed this out. We don't have the option of concluding that Jesus is just a wise teacher or something. That's like a lot of kind of nice people want to say, oh, I don't believe he's God, but he was a good teacher. He was a prophet of sort. You know, he's wise and he taught good things, and I respect that. Hold on a second. This guy taught that he was the be-all and end-all of the universe. Wise people don't say that unless it's true. Okay, so C.S. Lewis, I think, is the one who said, Jesus is either a liar, a loony bird, or who he really said he was. God in the flesh.
A loony bird.
We don't have the option of concluding he was some wise teacher. He was some good teacher. Because he claimed he was God. And he was a nutcase if that's not true. He's a liar, a lunatic, or he's the Son of God. He's God in the flesh. And I'm not here to impose the Christian faith on anybody. But we do need to take a look at what it actually proposes. And every human being needs to wrestle with this claim. And it's a bold claim. I can understand why people dismiss it. I can also understand why people embrace it, because I'm one who has encountered in this bold claim authentic freedom and liberation. The church is an extension of Christ. And so we believe another bold claim that when the church, and here we mean in her official pronouncements, the pronouncements of the Pope and those bishops in union with the Pope, when they speak on matters of faith and morals, we believe something astounding. That they speak the truth without error. Now again, either that's craziness, or maybe it's true. It makes logical sense to me. I'm just going to share how I see it. Chew on it however you like. But it makes logical sense to me that if we are going to be accountable by God to living the truth, then it only makes logical sense that God would give us a sure way of knowing what the truth is. Well, I don't like the way you interpret Scripture. I'm going to go start my own church. Well, I don't like the way you interpret it. I'm going to go start my own church. Isn't there? There's got to be the real interpretation somewhere, somehow. And it's got to be universal. You know what another word for universal is? Catholic. And it's not some triumphal claim. It's not a claim of arrogance. The Catholic Church knows everything, and if you don't just do exactly what we say, well, you're all going to hell. It's a gift, and we hold out this gift to the world. We propose it to the world. We propose it. Here's another key point. Not only must freedom respect truth, truth must respect freedom. Let's go back to what we said earlier. If freedom does not respect truth, I said, we become slaves to our own disordered desires. But if truth does not respect the freedom of others, we become slaves to other people's disordered desires. Are you following me there? We know, don't we know it, when somebody is trying to shove something down my throat, even if what they're trying to shove down our throats is true, there's an inherent, whoa, get out of my space, this is my kitchen. And I'll tell you a little story from my own life, how this kind of played itself out. My parents, God love them, they gave me so many beautiful gifts. I love my mom and dad tremendously, but they're not perfect, and nobody's mom and dad is. And one of the ways my mom and dad really hurt me when I was growing up is they were trying to impose Christianity on me. They were trying to impose their views and beliefs on me. And most of what they were trying to pass on to me was good. But they were forcing it on me. And it made me want to run the other way. And that's exactly what I did. When I was 17 years old, in fact, because the tension was so high in my home, because I'm involved in this dating relationship and my parents didn't like it because of their faith and religion, I ran away from home when I was 17 years old. And I come to learn later in life that in some ways my rebellion, I'm not trying to justify all of it, I was a pretty rebellious kid, but there was some truth in my rebellion. Look at page 12. Look at what the Catholic Church says here. This is from the Pontifical Council for the Family, quote, 2I. Parents should learn how to recognize the fragment of truth that may be present in some forms of their children's rebellion. You see how much the church respects our freedom? Look at the quote right above that, 2H. This is from my book, Theology, the Body Explained. How often have children educated in the faith rejected it as adults because their teachers, whether parents, pastors, or others, tended to impose religion upon them without respect for and education in authentic human freedom? Key point here, freedom must be challenged to submit itself to the truth, but no one can be forced to accept the truth without doing violence to the dignity of the person. When the truth is presented in all its glory, in all its splendor, in all its beauty, guess what? It doesn't need to be imposed, because it wells up from within us. We're naturally attracted to it like bees drawn to honey. When the beauty of the banquet is unfolded for people, hungry people come. Are you following me? Who ran to Jesus first and foremost? religious do-gooders who had repressed all their desires but followed the rules to the letter, were they the ones who embraced Jesus? Or was it the, quote, sinners, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the kind of scum, so to speak, the scum of society? They were the ones who ran to Jesus. You see, the people in the fast food column, the people who are eating from all that grease, as we're saying earlier, they might be eating from the wrong menu. But at least they are in touch with their desire. And they are the ones that when the banquet shows up, when the truth is presented in all its beauty, they're the ones who run to Jesus first. Because they're the ones who say, that's what I've been looking for the whole time. Are you following me? Jesus himself says it. The sinners, the tax collectors, the prostitutes are found more ready to embrace the kingdom than were the Pharisees. Or we could put it in this language. The addict is far closer to the mystic than is the stoic. Because all you have to do with the addict is take all of his addictions and all that twisted, distorted stuff that he's going after to feed the hunger. All you have to do is go tweak. And you are right in the bosom of Christ. Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors. From one perspective, he lived a very debauched life, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll galore. But listen to what he sings about. You know that I would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I were to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. He's yearning for that eternal explosion of love. He's yearning for that fire of love. He's yearning, as he himself said, to break on through to the other side. And all these self-righteous Christians can do and say is, you're going to hell. Why couldn't we say to Jim Morrison and said, dude, you are so close. Keep going, and you will break on through to the other side. The Doors. Hello. Knock, and the door will be open to you. What do you want? What will you do with your freedom? Will you fight? Fight for what? The truth that sets us free. Look at quote 2J. It's a remarkable statement. It's a summary of John Paul's teaching. This is not a direct quote from John Paul II, but a summary of his teaching. By imposing the observance of objective truth with force, you will do this. One excludes respect for the person and therefore deprives reality of a much higher value than the value which is impaired by the fact that man sometimes makes mistakes in the use of his freedom. In other words, that's maybe a complex way of putting it. Let me put it this way. A greater good is maintained when we use our freedom wrongly than when we are forced to do what is good. What is the greater good that is maintained? What's the greater good that is maintained when we use our freedom wrongly than when we're forced to do what is good? The freedom itself. Because without freedom, we can't love. You can't force someone to love. If love does not come from freedom, it's not love. Which means a shotgun wedding is not a real valid marriage because you're forced into it. Love has to come from freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Bottom of page 12 here. Stand fast, therefore, And do not submit again to slavery, for you're called to freedom. But don't use your freedom, this is a term of St. Paul's that I'll explain in a minute. Don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. Use your freedom rather to learn how to love one another, learn how to serve one another. Now, what does Paul mean here by the flesh? St. Paul is not saying your flesh or your body is bad. When he talks about living by the Spirit and not by the flesh, he's not saying the Spirit is good and the body is evil. He's not saying reject the flesh in favor of the Spirit. No. He's saying we need to open our bodies to the indwelling of God's Spirit. That's the wine. Have you ever wondered why we call alcohol spirits? There's a connection here. Because literally, in the very symbolism of Christianity, wine communicates the Holy Spirit, the very love of God. What does the priest say over the wine and the bread? Let the Holy Spirit come upon these gifts to make them holy. And we drink that wine in. That's the new wine. And if we really open our hearts to that new wine, we are going to get drunk in the Spirit. That means we are going to be on fire with love. When we eat and drink Eucharist, as one of the fathers of the church put it, John Paul II quotes him, I forget who the father was, I think it was St. Ephraim or something. When we eat and drink Eucharist, we eat and drink fire. We become, so to speak, a hunk of burning love. This is our freedom. To open our flesh to the indwelling of the Spirit, so that what we do with our bodies is inspired by God. That is the freedom for which Christ set us free. A lot of us, we have this idea of freedom as repression, as rejection of our sexuality somehow. For example, let's take a good-hearted, engaged couple who want to save sex for marriage. Not because sex is bad, but because they understand sex is meant to be an expression of a love that lasts forever. And what's that commitment called? The commitment to love someone forever. What's that commitment called? Marriage. We'll unfold more what that means later. But it makes sense when you think in these terms. But a lot of people think the only way I can do what is right is to reject my freedom. Oh my gosh, I know if I'm alone with my fiance, I'm going to screw up, so we'll never be alone. And we can actually get this kind of advice from people. You better never be alone together, because you know what's going to happen if you're alone. Now let me say this, out of an honest respect here. We need to know our weaknesses, right? And if you know that if you're alone with your fiance, you do something that you would later regret, okay, by all means, don't be alone. I honor you there. But don't call that freedom. That's not freedom. You're in chains still. Put it this way. If the only thing that kept you from having sex before you got married was the fact that you didn't have the opportunity to do so, do you really desire the good? Or are you enslaved by your passions and desire? Are you following me here? So we get this idea that okay, you chain yourself to this tree, and I'll chain myself to this tree so we can't get at one another. This is a very dangerous attitude. Very dangerous. You know why? What does the honeymoon become? Oh, now we're allowed to cut the chains loose. Cut! Is that an act of love? It's an act of lust, exactly. If you were not free the day before you got married to say no to sex, there is no magic trick on the wedding day that suddenly makes what you're going to be doing something beautiful and loving and wonderful and holy. Chastity, as we will learn in the next presentation, is an apprenticeship in self-mastery, where we become more and more in control of our hormones, rather than them being in control of us. 3C on page 13. It's very, very important. The very manner in which we conceive of the relationship of the sexes must be, to the greatest extent possible, freed from an impulse-oriented view and shaped according to the freedom and dignity of the person, who's not an animal who can't control himself, but somebody given freedom by God has the capacity to love. In the impulse-oriented view, there seems to be a tendency to limit the possibility of virtue and magnify the necessity of sin in the sexual sphere. If you're alone together, you know what you're going to do. I once heard a Catholic speaker who had many good things to say, but man, did he ever miss up here. He said, expecting young people to be alone together and not sin is like expecting them to be in a sauna and not sweat. Way to rob your audience of their dignity. Do you hear what he's really saying? You're an animal, you can't control yourself. Remember that old song by the Bloodhound Gang? We ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do it on the Discovery Channel. That is the epitome of license, which is the negation of authentic freedom. No, you and I and every human being, we have been given freedom by God as the capacity to love. You are not an animal. You are a person made in the image of God with the capacity to love. But we have to open to that freedom. We have to receive that freedom as a gift. We have to live according to the Spirit. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, page 13, there is freedom. And this means we have to have faith. Oh, you gotta have faith, faith, faith. You got to have faith, faith, faith. What is faith? Faith, John Paul II tells us, 3D. What an appropriate number that is. Let this pop out in 3D for you. If original sin is a denial of God's gift of love to us, and that's really what sin is. We don't believe God loves us. We don't believe God wants to bring us into this banquet. So we settle for the greasy fast food. But faith, on the other hand, in its deepest essence, is the openness of the human heart to God's gift of love, poured out in His Holy Spirit. And so maybe we can pray together, come, Holy Spirit, fill our hearts. Grant us the gift of faith that we might open to this love from heaven, that love that satisfies, that love that sets us free to be a gift to one another, that we might be set free from the domination of lust, and we might come into the authentic truth of love. That's where we're headed in our next lecture, to unfold what is authentic love. And what role does chastity play in authentic love? Chastity is not a burden. Chastity is not a big no to sex. Chastity, as we will see, is the virtue that orients all of our sexual desires towards the truth of love. Stay tuned. Thanks very much.
Come out, come meet me. I've been poisoned, I've been used, and now I'm standing at your gate.
So, I know there's going to be questions. Y'all want to put them? You're going to pass the box around? A couple of things I want to bring out. I don't know if he brought them out. That's in your books. Okay, 1E. Man's freedom is limited and fallible. In fact, man failed. He freely sinned. By refusing God's plan of love, he deceived himself and became a slave to sin. This first alienation engendered a multitude of others. Sin always builds on itself. From its outset, human history attests it is all around us and has been forever. It's everywhere. And if there is no truth, if there is no objective good, y'all, does anybody, or do you understand the difference between objective and subjective? Okay,
Subjective means that it's like subjective to you and it doesn't matter. Objective is it is the truth and it doesn't change.
okay, that's a way of saying, but you need to throw the truth in there. When you throw the truth, that kind of gets.
Oh, right. When it's subjective,
subjective is
Independent.
subjective is independent. It is
Oh.
subjective is a subject. You're a person.
Oh,
Okay.
I see.
Let's say a pencil is an object.
Oh,
It's an
right,
object for
right,
writing.
Right.
Okay, what it writes is subjective. Okay, but the pencil doesn't do the writing, but the person doesn't do the writing either. So you're using an object for a subject. You know, do you follow what I'm saying, that analogy? So a subjective is something that we can understand, and it kind of changes between person to person to person. Objective, physical objectives. Light is objective. You know, gravity is objective. If you don't want to believe in gravity, and you really don't think gravity has any effect on you, don't step off a high building. Because regardless of what your subjective belief is, the objective belief, at least on the earth, in our area, you're going to accelerate towards the ground at 32 feet per second squared until you hit terminal velocity, until you hit the bottom where you go to zero real fast. Okay, and then that'll be it, depending how far it is. Hopefully it's a couple feet. But there are objective things or objective truths, but then there are objective truths that come from God. And those, we really can't decide what it is, and that's where the good and evil comes in. That's what original sin is. And this quote he gave from the Supreme Court, I mean, to me, it's mind-boggling.
Do you know whose that is?
Huh?
Do you know what justice that is?
It was the Supreme Court.
Well,
I know, but
one judge
Who wrote it? Well, I don't know. Let me see if it says in here. It says the case, but I don't know if it says who the.
It's gonna be Roe v. Wade.
No. It's Planned Parenthood versus
Oh, there's
Casey.
like 7.
It's Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and it's in 1992.
Interesting.
Was it Roberts?
I don't think Roberts was on the Supreme Court yet.
Oh.
Not in 92. No, he was way later. But at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. And that's the heart of liberty. I'm sorry, that's the heart of chaos.
I was gonna say, do you think we can use that as the defense for the Catholic Church when they won't do gay marriage? Because it's at the.
Well, I just saying, but the whole deal is they say that, but then they don't really mean it. And then they turn around and impose stuff just by fiat. But they actually codified original sin. It's the first government to ever codify original sin that I've ever seen. Other than maybe Après moi le déluge, the Sun King, whatever, Louis the 14th or whatever, after me the flood. I mean, he was just like, he's the guy that built Versailles, and his son or grandson was the beheaded. Grandson was beheaded in the French Revolution. He was the last great martyr.
But he actually said, I don't care what happens after me as long
Yeah.
as.
After me,
long as I
we
get
can
what I
flood the
want.
earth. I don't care, because after me, it doesn't matter. And that's where you get when you get to this type of an attitude. It's like it's all about me and it's not about you. Where's the one in here? I got marked if I can find it real fast.
Take your glasses off.
Yeah, I've got them off. See. Okay, if there is no truth, objective God, to which we're all accountable, then all that exists is a power struggle between opposing opinions. Anybody looked anywhere at anything lately? That's all we have. Those with the most money, media influence, or military muscle will impose their self-serving view of the world on the rest of us. Might makes right. Benedict XVI, just before he well, actually that was Pope Ratzinger just before he became.
No, not Pope Ratzinger.
I'm sorry, Cardinal Ratzinger just before he became Pope Benedict XVI. That was his address to the conclave just before they went to vote. And I've never seen it as tyranny of relativism. I've seen it as the dictatorship of relativism, but that's just a translation. So, yeah, we've got this, we are given a freedom, and we can either properly use it or we can abuse it. And liberty and freedom, they're kind of quasi the same thing. I mean, they're basically there. But if you aren't free, you can't love. And his, let's kind of go with the questions here. Those were a couple of points I wanted to bring it up just because he kind of doesn't hit every single thing in the book, and I don't think he should. But freedom is the what and love is the what. Anybody remember? It's like what his first point he made.
Freedom is the means, love is the end.
Yep. Freedom is the means, love is the end. Okay? The end of freedom is to be loved. Now, a great way I've seen things is that you love people, you use things. Remember, the opposite of love is not hate, it's use. Freedom uses people. I'm sorry. License. Inauthentic freedom. Improper freedom. You use people to get what you want, to obtain what you want. Okay? Genuine freedom, you have to give them that option. You can't force a woman to say she loves you. She has to do that on her own.
Well, you can force her.
You can't force her, but it's meaningless. And it's not love. And if you pay somebody $40 million to marry you, it ain't love, okay? It's a contract. That's all it is. You bought a car, it's just a human instead of a car. I mean, a real expensive car, but still. We conflate getting our way with love. You know, that's just what we do.
If you loved me,
you'll give me what I want. If they love me, they do what I said. The problem with that self-love is you have to change the whole stinking world to do what you want to do. And to do that, you better have a really tough army. And then you better have people around you that don't want to be the one in charge instead. All of this stuff that's going on is because of this distorted view of love, self-love. And the fact that truth and freedom, where was that quote? If they go hand in hand.
If truth and freedom go hand in hand, because if they don't, they both perish miserably.
Yeah.
Wow, she built me the book.
I know. She's amazing. So now we can get into other questions if you want, or we can go through the questions in the book. And we've got the box. Does anybody have any questions before I go to the box?
I really like the part about the parents not imposing, but proposing. And I think that's where my parents went wrong.
I think it's where just about everybody everywhere has gone wrong.
And I want to understand that mindset more of proposing instead of imposing for myself.
Well, again, that's it is so easy to impose because you can force the results. I mean, I'm sorry, we're conditioned to it in school. We're conditioned to it from about the beginning of our lives all the way through. The boss can impose his will on me. Yes, you got a question?
No, I just have
Our
thing with
comment?
that, yeah. I think in philosophy there's a guy named Paulo Freire, and he calls it the banking method versus the existential growth method. So like, you can use somebody as a depositing element, or you can choose to challenge somebody's beliefs and ideals and force them to grow. Because if you deposit money just constantly, but you never do anything with the money, it's like the passage we went over last night. Like if you just keep the 10 coins, it's irrelevant. But if you're able to challenge and like invest it, even if you lose something, you're gaining something in the end by developing your beliefs and values. So like choosing to like intend to do those things will like improve that.
And what was it called?
That theory is Paulo Ferreira's, it's called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's philosophy about education, and it's about morals also, but yeah.
Kind of on that line, 2G.
Interesting.
By giving man an intelligent and free nature, God has thereby ordained that each man alone will decide for himself the ends of his activity, and not be a blind tool of someone else's ends. Therefore, if God intends to direct man towards certain goals, he allows him to begin to know those goals so that he may make them his own and strive towards them independently. God allows man to learn his supernatural ends, but the decision to strive towards an end, the choice of course, is left to man's free will. God does not redeem man against his will. And we have to raise our own kids that way. We have to treat our co-workers that way. You've got to respect the person's individual freedom. You've got to respect that. Even if they're wrong in your idea, they're totally wrong. You can discuss stuff, you can try to explain things, but if they want to go their way, you have to let them. And if you try to force it by hook or crook, you're actually doing damage to their dignity. Yes, Tim?
That's a good point. And I in my political science class,
Political science is almost designed to force people, but go ahead.
it's interesting you say that because I had a discussion with my professor today. I just asked him for the talk and everything. And I was like, I do realize that sometimes I'm wrong and everything, and I like to talk to people about why they believe certain things and everything, and I told him, I was like, I ask people why they believe that, what they believe, and I say, okay, and I just tell them maybe why I believe what I believe, and I don't tell them that they're wrong or anything, I just try to understand what they believe, I don't try to push what I believe on them, and sometimes it's really hard for me to keep my mouth shut and not say, that's not right!
Well, yeah, it sure is. Yeah, it certainly is.
That
Sometimes
class
it's
is-
very hard.
That class is just Supreme Court cases, so.
No, I'm talking about my political science class.
With Mueller?
No,
Oh, another one.
Dr. Welch.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, the domain we live in now, again, it's like institutionalized coercion at levels because of the media, the interconnectivity that we have. You can't just walk off and be unknown anymore. It's like they know if you got a phone in your pocket, they can pick you from space. Do what? What?
Tell them about the phone in your pocket when we were discussing ice on the pool.
Yeah, okay. This is are they listening to us?
Oh, they
Yeah,
are.
they are.
Definitely.
Okay, this is gonna be funny because it's gonna pop up on you guys' Facebook probably or whatever. But I can't remember what we were talking about. But I'm an air conditioning guy. Okay, they actually had a way in like the Middle East of refrigerating like milk 800 years ago. Okay, and the way they would do it is you would simply dig a hole and then you would insulate the bottom of the hole, put something in it that would hold water, would not leak, like an animal stomach or something, would stretch it out to where it'd be a basin. and then you would put whatever you wanted to in it, and then you would cover that with like a rock, and then you'd insulate over the top of that. And during the day, it would be under that, and at night, you would take it off and let that be exposed to the nighttime sky. And the next morning, you'd cover it, and you'd do it, and you would do that for several days. And you could get the water cold enough to form ice.
In the Sahara Desert.
In the Sahara Desert, because deep space is very cold, and that water radiates directly through, and for that area there's no clouds. At night it's almost always a clear sky. So those areas of the deserts, they get like 110 degrees during the day, and then they get down to 40 at night because you lose all the heat. So that's just how radiation works versus conductive. We're used to convection and conduction. We don't really understand radiation except when you're standing by a campfire. When you're standing by a campfire and it's cold, and the back of your backside's burning, it didn't heat the air up any. Okay, that's radiant. It's going straight to. So that's just one of those examples. It popped up on our internet like 2 days later. How to do this? How to make one of these? I mean, it popped up on our stupid Facebook as an ad. I'm going, oh, that's there listening. I mean, they are just. It's so crazily esoteric to pop up, It was just like crazy.
My daughters firmly believe that there's an agent listening to them, so they'll say, they'll talk about their menstrual cycles or something, and they'll go, oh, sorry, Leonard!
Yes, yeah, their agent is Leonard. So they have conversations with him. So, off on a different subject, yeah. So, any other comments before I go into the box? I don't know what I'm going to find in the box. And once again, it is not stump the priest.
Okay, so just
goodness.
morally, you cannot impose. But I'm telling you better impose on your 2-year-old.
Yeah.
You think that child squeaking in mass is bad? You don't impose behavior on that child. I tried, and my kids still ran under the pews, dumped out ladies' purses looking for gum.
Yeah.
Raced each other under the pews to get to their favorite guy up at the front because he made faces at them as he walked in.
Yeah.
You can't impose morality, but you do have to impose behavior on them.
You have to discipline. You have to teach discipline. And this is, I tell parents this all the time because, we have 7 kids. How do you do that? Well, after 3, you can't tell. You really can't tell. But 3 is hell on earth. Because when you got 2, mom can tackle one, you can tackle the other, you got control. With 3, there's an odd man out. There's always one scooting free, no matter what you're doing. So you have to shift from control to discipline and to help them develop their own discipline. And that's what this whole thing is about. It's not about crushing their freedom. But at the same time, you've got to teach people. You've got to train people. God does the same thing. He teaches us discipline. Why does there have to be a definitive church? Is there not salvation in Christ, void of tradition and clerical processes? Okay, first of all, the church shouldn't be understood as just tradition and clerical processes. But why does there have to be a definitive church? Because there's Christ. And he says, I will build my church on you. He only used the singular. And if you have multiple, then which one's right? If you have 500 churches, and this one says you can do it, and that one says you can't, and these 3 say, well, maybe you can, and that one says we don't know, who's right? Nothing's changed. If you don't have a definitive church, you don't have a source. You just have the opinions, the power, the politics. You just have this stuff going on. Okay, the church isn't here about the buildings and the vestments and all the rest of that. What is infallible is not what they do. What is infallible is what they teach. Does anybody know the church's definition of infallibility?
It's
Okay.
not everything that the Pope says
Nope.
is is true. Yes, there has to be like a certain something about like what he teaches on, like
Okay,
like
it's when he teaches,
doctrine, isn't it?
when he
And
teaches,
that is
when he's
infallible.
teaching in faith and morals, with the intention of teaching the entire church, and is doing it as what the church calls the magisterium, the teaching authority of the church.
Yeah.
If he does it in a private letter, it's meaningless. Okay?
So not on a plane.
Not on a plane.
On-
Not on a plane does not do it. That's not, the term they use is ex cathedra, which means from the chair or from the cathedral. And he's teaching it as the teaching of the church. Now, where did the church even get this crazy thing it existed? From the worst popes in history. Anybody did any research on the Borgia popes?
Alexander the Sixth.
They were hideous. They had mistresses. They had people killed. They were doing all kinds of crap that the church condemns.
Okay, Lucretia.
But how
Borgia,
many,
everybody
yeah,
heard
Lucretia
her?
Borgia.
She
You,
was the Pope's daughter.
yeah. So they are doing all of this garbage. How many of them said it was okay if we do it? They never taught it was okay. And in fact, in scriptures in the New Testament, Jesus, because we didn't get this like just came from nowhere. It came from the high priest and the temple. Because the high priest had the same protection. That's why Jesus says, don't do what they do, but do what they say, because they sit on the chair of Moses. Okay? That's the cathedra. From the chair. So, a pope cannot just come out and say, okay, I'm going to change this stuff. It's got to be through history too. It's got to be consistent. So, if it wasn't taught back when, and there's actually another case, there's another case for it, I can't remember the Pope's name, but he was going to promulgate a Bible that was incomplete. And I can't remember which books he wanted to throw out. And the book had been published. The Bible had been written. It was ready to be published. There was a lot of conflict, and there was a lot of bishops saying, no, don't publish this. This is wrong. Because we're teaching stuff the church has never taught. Well, he was convinced that it was right. And the way, does anybody know how Martin Luther started
wasn't it like the 95?
nailing the thesis on the
Yeah.
walls? That is
Yeah.
how they promulgated a decree. You went out and you nailed it to the door of the cathedral so that people could read it. When the Pope or whatever, when they had a decree to put out, they did it on the, and it's not at Vatican, but at the Lateran. The Lateran is his church, his diocese, if you will. But anyway, this Pope was going to do it. And the day before he was supposed to do it, he died in his sleep. And it was never done. I mean, they had the book published, they had it all ready to go out and said, let's launch it. And the next guy comes in and popes and he goes, throw that out. I want nothing to do with it. So a lot of people claim that this was a Catholic Bible, acceptable scripture, but he never promulgated it. So it lacked the official, he died the night before in his sleep.
Well, and then what about the priest the priest who killed everybody? So the Theodora killed everybody so he could be Pope.
Yeah.
And he could.
Empress
teach-
Theodora.
Empress Theodora, so he could promote Arianism as true. And he became Pope because she killed off everybody else.
Well, she killed off the previous popes too.
Right. And she said, okay, you're my Pope, I put you here, now you proclaim Arianism as true doctrine. And he said, I'm sorry, madam, I find myself unable to help you.
He wouldn't do it, so she killed him too. I mean, it's like, no problem, we just keep killing them. But the thing is okay, I guess the best quote I ever heard was it was an old cardinal, and an atheist was talking to him, and he says, "We are going to destroy your church in 100 years." And he just says, 100 years? Yeah. We've been trying for 1,500 and we haven't been able to do it. Good luck. Because the church has been protected from its own idiots inside. Just because a guy's a churchman doesn't mean he's the end all be all. And don't mistake infallibility with impeccability.
Sinlessness.
The Pope sinned.
Yeah.
And that infallibility is extremely limited, and it's a negative limitation. They will not teach error. Not that they will teach something wonderful. And again, Scott Hahn's example, if a man was infallible in math, and he has to take a test on differential equations, and he doesn't know the first thing about differential equations. He just never studied it. He never did get it. And he has to take a test, but he's infallible in math. So if he takes the test, what will he get on it? He'll get an incomplete. He won't take the test. He'll just refuse to take the test. It's a negative protection. It doesn't say the popes will teach. It doesn't mean they'll teach anything at all. Because the Borgias, well, they did a couple of kind of okay things, but that was a series of popes that were horrible. And yet they never once taught that what they were doing is okay.
And there actually
No emperor,
was a
no
myth.
king has ever done that. They always said what I'm doing is okay.
And
That's just
there was a saint after Alexander the Fool, Pope Alexander the Fourth, whose name is Andrew Borgia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was somebody from the family who tried to redeem the name anyway.
Okay. Okay, another one. I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, whoever it was, I tried to answer the best I could. If a woman invents a man to stay the night in her house and he rapes her, is it her fault? No! Did she sin? Not in that respect. How do you confess that? You take it to the priest, you tell him the situation. Okay, first of all, rape is a sin on the man, or on the person doing the raping. Let's put it that way. Because women can rape men too. It's just much easier for men to rape women. Rape is not a sin because, okay, first of all, what is required for a sin?
Yeah, it has to be.
It has to be grave matter.
Yeah, and it has to be purpose
Intention.
You have to understand it is, and then you have to want to do it and do it. You have to act upon it. Is a person who's raped acting upon it?
Yeah.
No. Now there may have been extenuating circumstances that led to this thing coming up. I don't know. It is so, that gets so complex in the rest of that. But priests are trained for this. This is one of the things they do. But it's not the fault any more than it's the fault of a victim when they're murdered. You know, if I walk out on the street, some guy runs me down in a car and drive off, I'm not guilty of killing myself, okay? It's not suicide. Because I had no part in it.
Okay, there was a.
Now, if I go out there and throw a rock through his window and run it down, okay, there's some extenuating circumstances here, and I may have some culpability, but it's not the same thing. I'm still not murdering myself. I'm not committing suicide.
Do you remember there was a case where a person came in to a Catholic bookstore and took all three women into the back, and he sodomized two of them, and the third woman said, "No, you are not touching me," and he shot her and killed her. There were actually people who said it was her fault she was shot.
Yeah.
Because if she had just given in he wouldn't have shot her, because the other two women survived.
And again, that's that
That's,
craziness.
you don't,
But
you
it's-
have to
it's
give
the-
in to somebody else's sin.
You don't have to go along. with
Okay,
it.
and I'm gonna
And it's
say
a lot
something else.
more levels than just that. Go ahead. She's on getting on this.
I'm on my
soapbox,
roll
guys.
here. If you are in a situation of abuse, it is the loving thing to leave. Because through no fault of your own, you have become an occasion of sin to your partner. If you love that person, you have to leave. and this is one of the things that, I sat back, I'm gonna tie this priest in knots. No, it didn't work. But he said, if you are in a situation of abuse, the victim, if they love the person, has to leave them.
Well, if you're in an abusive situation, you have to leave.
You have to leave, but
Yeah.
one of the things that makes it easier
I know.
is you're loving them by leaving.
And one of the things that we try to teach our girls, and it is a problem, but there is no evangelical dating. You don't start dating a really crappy guy hoping that your love will turn him around and he will become an absolute saint.
Because your
Okay.
love is not big
Because
enough.
well,
No,
it may be
your
great.
love
There
is
have
not big enough.
There
It
have
has to be
been
God's.
situations where it may have worked, but don't take it on yourself to do it. Okay, that's not what God wants us to do. He does not want us to enter into abusive relationships with each other. And sometimes the freedom to do something is the freedom to say no, not yes. In fact, that's the hardest freedom a lot of times to act on, especially with addictions. Addictions doesn't just mean addicted to sex, addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, addicted to smoking. You can be addicted to Dr. Peppers, folks. I was for 30 years. Okay? You can be addicted to anything. It becomes a crutch. It's just a habit. And it's like he was talking about with, saying no to sex, and he lasted 2 days. I'm sorry, but I can identify with that. But you're not in charge. Do you have any idea how many men are addicted to pornography in this country? It's mind-boggling. They can't give it up. And there's no age group thing. I mean, I had a guy that used to take meals to the old shut-ins. And he was talking to this old man. He was about 75 years old. And he was totally addicted. He could not turn the porn off. And he was crying. He was begging. He says, I can't do it. As soon as I do it, I turn it back on again. And he says, well, get rid of your TV. He says, I did. And then I do it on my phone. Well, get rid of your phone. I did. And my daughter gave me another phone. So he'll go and get it somewhere. I mean, it's just that he can't control himself. So he's a slave. He's a slave to that sin. Totally a slave to it. I was a slave to dating Dr. Pepper. It was hard for me to give it up. I gave it up for Lent and managed to do it, but I mean, it was a tough Lent.
And he was a bear.
I was not. I'm a wonderful person. Anyway.
Okay, it may have been that was also the same Lent that I gave up books.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not talking good books, I'm talking, Harlequin romances where I just needed words in front of my face, and so I gave that up, and, that was hard. I think I read The Little Engine That Could, I don't know how many times.
Whenever the cover fell off. But again, the tendency to blame the victim is I'm trying to come up with the words for it. It is how someone who will not accept responsibility for their own actions makes their own actions not their fault.
It's relativism.
Yeah, it's definite relativism.
It's-
Yeah, and that's what the tyranny of relativism is. You actually turn that into a weapon to use against other people. And it's called nuance. I love the word nuance. I actually hate the word nuance. But yeah, they take this and just like tweak it a little bit here and there and here and there and here. That's the pro-choice, you know, the anti-choice. If you're not pro-choice, you know, they take these little words and they you know, they just put anti in front of anything and then just put it in whatever group they want to identify, and then you condemn a whole group. It's actually there's also a logical fallacy, and I don't know the official word for it, but it's the part to the whole. If you can take one person out of a group and show that they're a creep, then you can use that as the example to get rid of, you know, to condemn the whole bunch.
It's cultural relativism.
Culture, yeah, it would be. But I mean, it would not necessarily be cultural because it could be anything. It could be any attitude, it could be any political stance, but yeah, it's that type of thing. But it's that if you can prove one guy's bad, then it's when I was going to college, they would say, well, if you can prove an exception to any rule, that disproves the rule. No, it doesn't. It proves that there's a rule. If you got an exception, there's got to be a rule. I mean, is there a rule that, you know, an exception? If I'm wearing black socks, it proves that nobody wears blue socks? No, because there's no rule. Nobody wears blue. I mean, it's crazy. But if you think about it, if you sit there and go, well, this proves the rule. No, all you're saying is that it's not absolutely 100,000%, you know, everybody does it. No, but nobody does that. But if you try to sit there and use an exception to say that disproves the rule exists, you're actually proving the rule exists by trying to come up with an exception to it. Do you follow what I'm saying? Otherwise, you can't do it. I mean, come up with an exception to red. That red is a color.
You never saw color to start with.
I don't know would be an exception.
You would never
That's
feel
this is the tree falling in the forest. Yeah. If a tree falls in the forest by itself, will anybody hear it? Will the squirrels and the deer be frightened or not? You know?
That's a
If you're not there to see them, that's total subjectivism. Yeah, well, whatever it is that makes noise, whether you're there or not. Whether you want to call it noise is a different story.
Something I've been thinking about when we were watching this, I'm thankful when I wasn't practicing for 10 years, kind of went from Christianity all the way to atheism, and then slowly back to Christianity and through Abrahamic religions. And something I never embraced was relativism. I always believed in objective truth. I remember like arguing for it in philosophy class. And I was thinking, you know, I'm glad I never accepted that. But then I'm thinking, I did kind of practice it though, practice the subjectivism.
Well, it's almost impossible not to. I mean, it really is. That's part of the fallen nature, is you do that. But that's why you need a guide. You know, that's why you need something to try to go, okay. And the whole thing is, and this he's talking about it here. You can't set up a set of laws to make it where it's not possible to sin. Israel tried that. They had 363, 600 and whatever precepts. They took the Mosaic law and then made precepts out of it. And it's this enormous number. And it was like, that's not an enormous number. Amarillo has probably 10 times that number. In fact, WT probably has 10 times that number. We got more laws on top of laws on top of laws on top of laws on top of laws.
Yeah, we were looking at dumb laws for each
Yeah,
state.
somebody mentioned that last week. When you get out of prison, you're supposed to get a horse and a pistol. That's in Texas law. When you get out of prison, they're supposed to give you a horse and a pistol. I wonder if I'm sure they don't do it anymore.
When we were looking at 50 dumbest laws in each state, we found the one that we saw in Texas was you can't take more than 3 sips of a beer standing up.
3 sips of beer?
Yeah, standing up.
That's a city ordinance.
It's okay.
I think laws can be city ordinances.
Yeah, I mean, there's laws and laws and laws. But then, that's why Christ talks about, that's why Paul talks about, that if you have the Spirit, there is no law. That doesn't mean you turn into a bunch of chaotic creeps. Is that if you love, then you don't need the law to tell you not to love. Does that make sense? And then you end up with a bunch of impositions that people don't even know that they're there. And, can you break a law without, intending to, without sinning? Well, yeah, you probably could. I mean, if you help a runaway, technically that's assisting harboring not a fugitive.
Well,
but
harboring a runaway is against the law. I was going into some foster laws, and so many foster kids run away from their foster
homes.
Their own parent, and then from their foster homes. And I thought, well, you should be able to do something to help these kids. And they're going, no. If you find you have a foster runaway in your home, like your kids bring them home and say, Mom, can this kid stay overnight? You are required to turn them in.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can be charged for kidnapping.
And it feels like a very unchristian thing to do. And again, if they're from an abusive relationship or something, I mean, but problem is then you get to what is the truth? Because are they going to say they are? Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but we had some friends that did exactly that, and she ended up robbing them blind. And it was a total lie. I mean, everything she said from the first day they picked her up until the last day they saw her was a lie. Because after she was gone, the police came around and started asking questions and go, yeah, we did. Says, yeah, well, you're the 6th family she's done this to. But she just worked the area. Yes.
So it seems as if many parents today impose on their children Christianity, and then they eventually leave. It's kind of like one of the questions it's referencing. And do you think parents have always been imposing throughout the past centuries when the church was more?
Well, yeah, yes and no. You want the children to learn their faith, to learn what it is, and you're going to have to do it with that. Okay, first of all, anybody that thinks a young child is absolutely eager to learn is not really.
Augustine talks about being opposed to learning.
Oh my goodness, yeah. In fact, when you talk about somebody that you just tweak, Augustine was tweaked. I mean, you read his early life, and I mean, this guy is nuts. He's crazy. I mean, he was doing it all, and then all of a sudden he ends up being one of the greatest doctors of the church. He must have never stopped writing. I mean, once he became a bishop, he must have never stopped writing for the rest of his life, because he wrote so much. There's like over 1 million, what would be the equivalent of 1 million pages written on scrolls in the Vatican Library. It says nobody has ever read everything that Augustine wrote. How in the world did he write it? But anyway, the imposition of parents, or it's a delicate balance between discipline and force. Because you want to instill self-discipline in them. You want them to do it. You want to see the benefits of it. You want to see the beauty of it. Okay, if you don't live it, hang it up. I taught CCD for a long time. The parents drive up, dump the kid out, drive away. Come back after CCD, pick the kid up, drive away. They don't even go to mass. Yeah. Sitting there going, what do we do? What am I wasting my time for? I'm trying to teach them something, and then they're sitting there like, for the 45 minutes I've got them.
They might not.
The only thing I got kids' attention on, T.O.B. You pop the sex word, boom, and their eyes are open, their phones are down. I mean, like, whoa, he's talking about sex in class. This is, I mean, it's like this really does. It touches a string. It hits people, and it kind of wakes them up. But to try to get across this, and he has the advanced whatever course, if you want to call it, called Into the Heart, which is the in-depth TOB course, and it's like what 23, 26 sessions. It's really deep. I did that with the men's group at St. Mary's. And amazingly, Saturday morning men's group, 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, Saturday. I started out with about 12, 13 guys. I ended up with about 24. I mean, it really rang. I mean, they were a bunch of guys getting up
Okay,
Saturday morning.
Funny, 'cause I thought you could say I went to down to about like 3.
No, that's what I'm saying. It grew the whole way through. It was amazing. And they were just like, wow, can we get any more of that? This is as big as it's got, guys. You know, unless you go and actually teach, to take the training to become a TOB teacher, but a professional on it.
Even here, we started with less than what's here now.
Yeah, I mean, it engages people. And to be honest with you, with students, with the crazy schedules you guys have, I'm proud and amazed that you're here consistently. Yeah.
So what do you think the decline of the church is?
The decline of the church is multifold. First of all, Vatican II was right. Vatican II was implemented wrong. Totally wrong. And I don't know if you've ever seen the way they talk about the spirit of Vatican II. I grew up with the spirit of Vatican II. Yeah. And that means you can do any damn thing you want if it's in the spirit of Vatican II. And I don't think most of them read it. Well, to be honest with you, the Humane Vitae. No, is that right?
The one about the birth control.
Yeah, birth control. Yeah. Paul VI. Humane Vitae ruptured the church. Not because the teaching was wrong. I don't think. Anyway, it affected me profoundly. That was a crisis year of my life when that was put out. And I rejected the church wholeheartedly from that moment on, just because the Pope was so backwards. Okay, went through life, I don't know how long, 30 years before I finally read Humane Vitae.
Why did you read it?
I don't remember.
He was looking for wiggle room.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I do remember that. Because she was like adamant on it. I guarantee I can find No, that is a airtight, brilliant, absolutely brilliant document. God is in that document. It is so tight, so perfectly structured, and so clear and concise. When I got done reading that, the only conclusion I could come by, because the American bishops just came down hard on it. And theologians, everybody just puked all over it.
And there was
and I read that thing and I said, the only way they could have ever come out against that document is they never read the stupid thing.
It was about contraceptives.
It's not about contraception at all. Never even mentions contraception.
Yeah,
It's the contraceptive mentality. The idea that you should separate sex from procreation. That's contraceptive. Now, we didn't have birth control pill, but I was married to the contraceptive mentality, which is basically, I don't mean married to you, dear, but the theory, I was married to no contraceptive mentality and totally understood. And but I was like, it's going to be when I want it, God, you just sit over there, and when I'm ready for a baby, I'll damn well let you know, okay? Until then, you just butt out. That was my attitude. Now, I didn't actually say that, but that was my attitude. And that's the attitude of just about everybody that.
And how dumb was I that I didn't pick this up when we were dating for a year?
Well, thank God you didn't. Thank God you didn't. But again, it's just this. I read that document and I'm just going, okay, there is infallibility. Because he did that document pretty much alone. There was one person that helped him in writing that. Anybody know who?
Holy Spirit.
JP2.
His name was Carol Wojcicki. Yeah. During Vatican II, they had met and he discussed this. And then after he became Pope, when John the 23rd died, he remembered the stuff that he'd gotten from John Paul II. But Carol Wojcicki, who was back in Poland, behind the Iron Curtain. And that was instrumental in the writing of it. Which is why if you read a lot of John Paul II's writings, and you come back and read that, you can kind of see him in it. His reasoning and his logic are in there. But it is an absolutely brilliant document. And it's not very big. In fact, that's one of the reasons, when I first wanted to learn what the church was, I picked that one because there was a little pamphlet in church and it's like 6 pages, like, pamphlet like this and it's like 6. I could read that in a night. It took me an hour to get through each paragraph, maybe 2 or 3. They're very, very, you read a couple of sentences and they go, okay, I understood of, the, and, but, for. The rest of that is, I don't even see how they put, how you can, so you like read a couple of words and you back up, then finally you get the whole sentence put together and you go, whoa. And then you go to the next sentence and the next, you go all the way through that document. It's brilliant.
Kind of on the contraceptive mindset, something I read recently is a couple that goes into marriage wanting a small family or no kids is like a priest going into the priesthood saying he's only going to do these sacraments and he's only going to do this part. It's like,
or I just don't want to bring any souls to heaven. Yeah. I want to be a priest, but I just want to say mass by myself. It's like, why?
Or I just want to live alone in the rectory.
And I don't think he'll get into it in this necessarily. In some of his other ones, he really gets into what the priest actually does. His one for married couples is great because he gets into basically the section he's doing here where he talks about freedom. He says, ladies, do you want to be married to a man who can't say no to sex? Nobody raises their hands.
If you want to manipulate.
And he says, in the 20 some odd years I've been doing this, no woman has ever raised her hand. Now you notice I didn't ask the guys that. Go, oh yeah.
But I pointed out.
And I didn't understand why. I said, why? What's the deal?
I pointed out, you want a woman who can't say no to sex? Or do you want a woman who can't say no to sex to you? Because even as gorgeous as I am, I have been hit up by other people besides my husband at church. Okay? At church. I was so offended.
Lately?
No, not lately.
Okay, just checking. Just checking. I can see from way back when. Yeah. She used to be hot.
Like something with grace, a woman doesn't want a man that can say no, but
because a woman knows if the man can't say no to sex, he'll say no to sex. Can't say no to sex to everybody. There's no chance he'll be faithful.
But then the woman can manipulate the man through sex. So kind of like in.
Well, yeah, but that's a cop told me that men will use money and power to get sex. Women will use sex to get money and power. It's not intended to be a medium of exchange, and yet we've turned it into that. Like I said, it's not a love match; it's a contract. And it's like a mafia contract. It's the worst thing we can make it, and we do it all the time. We don't even think anything about it. That's why this thing is so important. Understand that the freedom, the truth, and how God works into it. If you'll open your hearts up and you let the Holy Spirit in, you don't need the laws because you don't want to break them. I don't need thou shalt not kill to keep me from killing Rozanne, even when I'm mad at her. Because I don't want to kill Rozanne. I love Rozanne, okay? Her name's Rozanne. But It's not because there's a commandment to do it, and I don't need the commandment to keep from stealing, because I don't really want to steal, because the ramifications of that are a lot of negatives. And adultery. When I first got married, I don't know what it is about women. You put on a wedding ring, and I mean the challenges come up. I was getting hit on just like she was. I mean, when I was at work, I'll be doing a job someplace. You know?
I've been reading Proverbs, and it talks about how one of the worst things is adultery, because you're only doing it for your own desire. Like somebody that steals to eat, I think is the reference.
Yeah, stealing to eat is different from stealing for the wealth.
Right.
Well, okay, but you're having this for your own entertainment, basically.
It's only for you.
It's only for you.
And yeah, it's not for the good of the other person.
Stephanie.
So, kind of story to go along with, like, you don't do things out of, because the rules are there. My dad shared this story, which I had never heard before, a couple weeks ago, and he was like, yeah, Andrew, my brother, went over to a friend's house one day, and the friend was like, okay, so, we have rules here, so, like, you gotta do this, and you can't do this, and Andrew was like, you got rules? And the kid was like, yeah. We don't have rules. And he goes, why don't you have rules? And Andrew was like, I don't know. So he went home and he was like, Mom, Dad, why don't we have rules? And they were like, cause y'all don't do anything that needs the rules. You do what you need to. Like, why would we make rules if you're already doing what you're doing? Like,
Yeah.
and doing what you need to.
Oh, we had rules. Things like, if you fight, you lose.
Yeah, that was different. You fight, you lose. Both of you lose. Don't take sides, take them both. Stay under control. My kids hate that. They still go, stay under control. Yeah.
What's the other one they hate? Boring is good.
Boring is good. Dad is boring. Boring is good. And now they're like getting to the point where they've had their cars break down, they've had wrecks, and go, Dad, you know what? Boring is good. Yeah, boring is good. Embrace boring, because life goes on better with boring. Excitement tends to be really risky.
Really do like the addict is far closer to the mystic than the stoic.
Because the Stoic rejects basically part of his being in order to repress it.
I never viewed stoicism as that. Is that accurate, kind of what he was saying?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Because Stoic, again, the Stoics just, I mean, I read about him and I found absolutely nothing attractive in him, and I didn't read anymore.
Do you know about King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, the 4 archetypes?
I've heard them, but I haven't really.
I think the Stoic kind of fits into one of those.
King, Warrior, Magician,
Lover.
Mm-hmm. He would be the magician, probably.
I think the magician, there's bipolar opposites.
Well, actually, warrior also could be. Warriors tend to be very stoic by their training.
There's the bipolar
The distance.
opposites of each of them, where the warrior's the point, and then you have the bipolar opposites, and then you also have it to boyhood as well. There's different names for it, and you're trying to be at the peak instead of like the bipolar opposites. And you have the addicted lover and the addicted lover and the like you hate everybody kind of. And you try to be in the center. It's interesting. But
Okay.
I can't explain it well.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can understand it either.
Yeah.
The Stoic is like when you're a kid, if you were scared of the consequence of your actions, or if you're scared of the action itself. Like when you went and like your dad's like, you're getting swats today, versus, I'm disappointed in you because this is wrong. So like you fundamentally realize what the action is wrong versus the result being wrong. Because like stoicism is just like, the result is going to be wrong, so I don't want to ever try and participate in anything that leads to the result, versus actually attacking the issue at hand. They're attacking the result and not the problem in itself. That's what I get.
Yeah, well, Puritanism was a Stoic
goodness.
type of religion, where they had to, again, it's one of those things you read it and you're just like, I want to read about, life and fun. Hilaire Belloc said, he was, wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there's laughter, there's laughter, dancing, and good red wine. Well, yeah, Hilaire Belloc's my kind of guy. But he wrote that in the post-Victorian England, where they were, Victorianism got very much that way. And that tends to be where Christianity tends to fail the worst, is it goes into a puritanical, stoic type thing. It's not to be confused with the monasteries, because the monasteries have this stuff too, but you choose to go into the monastery.
Well,
And their thing is a more.
No monastery talked about sinfully beautiful peacocks or sinfully beautiful horses.
Yeah, you enjoy the life you have, but you give up so much, so what you do get, you enjoy more. If that makes any sense. It's like, yeah, okay, they don't drink a lot, but then they'll get like we were given some eggnog from some sisters, and they said, don't let the kids drink it. And I says, okay, well, so Mom put it out in the refrigerator, and come Christmas or whatever, I take a little thing, go, it's like 50%. I mean, it's like, good Lord. I'm saying, this is like really, really strong. I mean, the rum is just like way over the top. And I'm like, I took a glass like this, and I'm just going, I'm going to be put it back in the container. So you get this like, like a shot glass. Yeah, and that's how they would drink it. They would get it out like once a week or a month or something on a special occasion, and they would drink a shot of it, and it just made them feel good. But it was a delight. Another analogy, and kind of in the same line, was somebody was trying to explain the difference between heaven and hell. What is the variance of heaven and hell? And it was like, okay, if you take a cup of ice cream, just one cup, to heaven, you could have who knows how many, just like dip the end of a needle in it and taste it and describe it, and all of heaven will be satisfied. You could take a trainload to hell and nobody would get any, because everybody wants it all. And they would destroy it and turn it filthy and absolutely, if anybody tries to get anything in their mouth, they take crap and shoving it in their mouth to keep them from eating it, because they want to eat it all. They want to have it all to themselves, and you have this entire horrible destruction until it's all gone. That's the difference between heaven and hell.
There's a story like that I heard was in the Jewish tradition. It's a bunch of people sitting around a table with
their arms,
very long spoons,
yeah,
with soup in the center and short arms, I guess. And hell is trying to feed yourself with the spoon. Heaven is another person feeding you to the side.
And that's a similar type of analogy. But in hell, they're just miserable because they can't eat.
And it's melted.
Of course, I had a salesman once tell me a joke where the guy goes down to hell, and Satan says, okay, this is what hell looks like. And well, eventually he goes up and sees heaven, and he says, well, that's pretty nice. Then he goes down to show him hell. And he goes down, and they're having a party. It's a great time. Everybody's dressed nice. They're laughing. They're all the rest of the stuff. And he says, actually, I'm more attracted to hell. He says, I'd rather go to hell. He says, okay, well, you want to go to hell? You can go to hell, but you can't come back. He says, okay. Then he goes down there, and they open the door, and it is absolutely horrible. The heat, the nastiness, the people are just crushed down, and it's horrible. And he's sitting there going, wait a minute, what's the deal? This is not what you showed me the other day. He says, well, no, the other day we were recruiting. Salesman like that one. But I just, you want to hand me anything? You've been writing. Are you just taking notes? You've been writing stuff down. I don't know if you get questions.
Ask you afterwards.
Okay. I don't know what time we're getting to be.
8:30.
Huh?
8:30.
Okay.
More like $8.45.
Oh.
Yeah.
You haven't looked in a while, have you, dear?
I was just so interested.
Oh yeah, I know. I guess yours are 8:41. So, any other questions, comments? I mean, I'm enjoying this. This is, I mean, I enjoy
Are
it.
they enjoying it?
Yeah, are you guys enjoying it? Y'all bored? Yeah. But I can tell I've been talking a lot because my throat's getting weird.
Something I thought about earlier is that you could describe discipline as the path to freedom.
Yes. Freedom without discipline, I don't,
It's chaos.
it's chaos.
Gotta be ordered.
You've got to have order to it. And that's one of the things that he talks about in that other course. It's called Into the Heart. But he talks about the longest distance in the human body is from here to here. To get the brain and the heart to come together. And to understand in the Bible, when they talk about the heart, it's the seat of the will and the emotions, and then the head is the intellect. So when you get the intellect, because like I said, if you have all intellect, you're cold. You're callous. I mean, you calculate everything, but you care nothing about anybody. That's the intellect only is the sociopath, psychopath. You know, it's all just that thought and control. And the heart only is just, it's a loose cannon. I mean, they're just going everywhere. I mean, they're getting hurt. They're running around. And it's the intellect and the heart together, where the heart informs the intellect and the intellect guides the heart, is when you become the whole person. And that's really what most of Catholic the Ignatius, I'm struggling for words here. The Saint Ignatius, the thing he developed, the way the spiritual exercises. They have a lot of the orders have like exercises that they use to help to achieve this, where you can get the mind and the heart to where they're functioning together. Because it's real easy to get your emotions run out of control. And it's real easy, well, it's not real easy, it's really bad to get your mind so much in control that your emotions have no chance. And I was there for a very long time. I can tell you from experience, it's suckaroonies, okay? So like I said, I was the king of my own creation, and it was a miserable kingdom to live in. Because it was just me. The other people couldn't stand to be around me. And I had no emotional connections to people. I didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to love because I'd suppressed it.
Talking about drinking eggnog with sisters and everything. Makes me think I visited this one seminary and they drink beer on every Sunday maybe. They can have like one beer or something, but then on big feast days like the Immaculate Conception or whatever, they can have like 3 or something.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking more about trying to align my life and the way I live it to the liturgical seasons of the church, and trying to do that more and find it interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Figure
so
out how to
much
do it.
fun, because that's the way we try to do our homeschool. It was according to the liturgical year.
Really?
Yeah, so we had like, for Feast of the Assumption in August, we would have a big dinner with the china and the goblets and the wine and candles. Well, let me tell you, do not do candles with children. The napkins catch on fire. But we did, and then we schmeckered our priests and we got allowed to do the decorating in the church. So, you know, everybody else put up flowers. When me and Adelina got to decorate for the Immaculate Conception, we had fluffy stuff all around the Virgin with sparkly lights and big flowers in front. And Father said, wow. I said, I want it obvious, something's changed.
Yeah.
Not just new flowers.
Not just somebody replace the flowers with old fake flowers.
It's just a movie that's come to my mind with all that we've talked about freedom is Babette's Feast.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen that movie.
That's a very interesting movie. And what's it called?
Babette's
Babette's Feast.
That is such a good movie.
Yeah, that's a very interesting movie and totally. Yeah, and that's, you almost have to sit back and think about that when it's over and you're going, okay, I kind of got it, but I'm not sure I got it.
I just tried to do the feast. But, you know, it's really hard to get turtle, and I'm just not brave enough to.
No, you're not gonna do that.
Quail
That's-
with their heads on.
You're telling stuff and they're not gonna watch it now. This is gross. I don't wanna watch that thing.
No, I mean, she was a genuine French chef, and she went into a village where they ate bread that had
They weren't
They
Puritans, but they were very
poured,
puritanical.
ale over it and stirred it up into this, it looked like food, I swear it looked like food. And they just slopped it in bowls,
And that's what
and
they
that's what they fed the poor. And I'm just going.
Make sure the poor die soon.
I am a
Any other questions? We keep running down rabbit holes, you notice
I
that?
know, I'm sorry.
But,
My sisters and I take 45 minutes to say goodbye on the phone.
yeah, she went in today to make lunch while I was unloading some firewood, and I come inside and she's talking to her sister, and I'm going, okay, lunch ain't happening. So I waited about 30-45 minutes to go, okay, I made myself lunch, went back out, started working. She comes out about an hour later.
Okay, I'm done.
I'm done. Yeah, it's been 2 hours, dear.
She lives in Georgia, it's a long way away.
I know, but anyway, it just takes them a long time to say goodbye.
It takes us a long time
To say.
anything.
It's from Tolkien, right?
That's from the,
Leave it there.
that's Treebeard.
Definitely thankful for Humane Vitae.
Humane Vitae, well, the writings of John Paul II for me, now the only one I'm not a philosophical or theologically versed person. I'm a mechanic. So I have to struggle a lot of times with the language, and John Paul II does not write easy stuff to read. His thoughts, his paragraphs are very dense, but he gets a lot out of them. So I mean, I read Humane Vitae first, and that was Paul VI. And I mean, it was 6 pages, and I was at that time I was working midnights, and I had a lot of dead time. And I just carried that little thing around, so whenever I was doing something, waiting for somebody else to show up, and I just pull it out and start reading it again. I guess it took me a month to get through that before I really even got it. And then I had to reread it a couple more times before it really burned in. And then I'm just sitting there going, this is amazing. So then I read Evangelium Vitae, which is the Gospel of Life. No, I don't think so. I think I read, I can't think, like Dave, what was it? No, Dave Verbum is from the Vatican II. I read those much later. When everybody kept talking about Spirit of Vatican II, Spirit of Vatican II. So I got it. So, okay, let's see what Vatican II actually says. Guess what? Doesn't say any of that crap. None of it's in there. You know, none of it's in there. And I had a priest, what's what Vatican II says? I just pulled the book out. You want to show it to me? You know, show me where it says that. Because I, by God, went through those, except for the ones, the discipline of religious orders of the third, tertiary religious orders, kind of like skipped over those. But the major documents of the church, I read through those things. And like I said, I love the readings of John Paul II. The only one I couldn't finish, which still bothers me to this day, is Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason. Because he made so many references to so many theologians and philosophers I had no idea what his references were, so I couldn't, when he would talk about this person, that, or when such and such said this, and go, oh, you put down one sentence, I think I got to go read 9 books to find out what that is, I just reached a point where it just expanded past my ability to read it.
Reasonable.
Do what now?
It wasn't reasonable.
Yeah, well, his faith and reason, from what I understand, is absolutely ironclad wonderful. But again, I don't know. He just throws off all these philosophers, and I mean, it's not like 2 or 3; it's like 40 or 50. To where the point where I just, I think I know what your point is, but I don't know how it relates into these arguments. Because he'll bring them up as a counter to the argument, but he'll just mention their argument, not what it is. So if you don't kind of know what he's going from, then it's kind of hard to read.
You read the Morris Laetitia?
No, I have not read that one.
It's by Pope Francis.
Oh no, I haven't hardly read. I think I've read. What was his first one? It was.
That one was on the environment, I believe.
No, it wasn't the first one then. It's the one he did on Christ. Christ redeemed. I don't know. One of his early ones I read. He's a lot easier to read.
Really?
Oh yeah, you can blast right through. Pope Francis is really easy to read. He is very pastoral. So yeah. And then Cardinal Ratzinger was kind of in between. I'm sorry, not Pope Benedict XVI. Of course, I did read Cardinal Ratzinger too. But I said when I had to educate myself on that stuff.
Did you ever read the Prophecy of Cardinal Ratzinger in like 1969?
No.
It talks about what he sees happening to the church, and that the church will lose its place, its standing, where it won't have as much political influence. It'll lose its respect.
Okay.
The church will shrink, and eventually, the world will become more evil, and that the church will be the bastion of freedom for man. It's really interesting.
Well, I mean that's kind of revelational too. I mean, if there's who was Cardinal Chicago,
George?
Cardinal George. He said that I'll die in my bed. My not predecessor, but my successor will die in jail. His successor will die on the streets. He's basically saying they're all seeing it. They're all seeing it coming. I'm seeing it too. I don't want to be really. Oh, hey guys, isn't this a wonderful, cheery thing? I'm old and about to kick out of here.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's very admirable with you guys that you always look to her to know what you're thinking of, and she knows what you're thinking of. Especially faith wise, and
Yeah.
you guys seem to be on the same page.
Yep.
How do you get there?
My daughters, what do they call that? That marital ESP or whatever?
Yeah.
We'll be sitting at the table and somebody will say something and we'll look at each other and then we'll just start laughing. And they go, I hate it when you do that. So you guys communicate and we have no idea what you just said. Going, yeah, well, there you go.
Okay, it's a long, painful process.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. And it
We're
takes,
meant to be like this. This is the way God meant us to be. But you have to go.
yeah, he bashes you around for a while.
And a fighter, a barroom brawler eventually gets flat knuckles. So we flattened.
Yeah.
But it took a lot.
I did. And without God in the middle of it, we wouldn't be here.
I am not his intellectual equal in any way. I admit that. But I played with my guardian angel as a little girl. I probably until I was 4 years old, saw my guardian angel. My first conscious sin, he disappeared. And so I have kind of this, I read Humana Vitae before he did. And I just went, yeah, I knew that. And so when he's saying, oh, this is just, I'm getting a paragraph a week. And I'm going, lightweight? But, so I have a more infused knowledge than he does. I mean, he has worked for every bit.
Scraped every last word.
And he comes up with these.
I know, I do. Look at this incredibly profound thing. I learned that was 4. Okay, shut up.
So when it came to that line, that contraceptive line, it was one of those things, well, okay, I'll go to the Lions on this one. I will not. And we had a big fight. And I finally said, okay, you can have a vasectomy. You decide what church we're going to. Because we are not going to a Catholic church if we are gonna act that way.
I've been fighting against people attacking the Catholic Church my whole freaking life. Are you nuts? What do you mean leave the church? He goes, nope, that's what I'm gonna do. But you can't. That's what I'm gonna do.
If you do that, this is what we're doing. Because we're not gonna stand in front of our kids and say, these are the rules of the Catholic Church, but we don't have to listen to them.
Now just for the, okay, we were supposed to be practicing natural family planning. Natural family planning, if you do it, is more effective than anything else. And I mean, I started teaching people on it. So what do you do in natural family planning to not have children?
You don't have sex.
Everybody in this room's doing it right now. Okay, you just don't have sex. That's what we do 99.99999% of the time anyway. All you got to do is just control yourself until she's out of fertility. A woman cannot get pregnant every day. She's got a fertile period, and outside of that fertile period, she can't get pregnant. Although you can possibly get pregnant, which is why you need to be open to life. So, but the whole thing is, and I don't know if he talks about this on this. He does with the marriage.
Yeah.
But it's like, he does a beautiful analogy. So let's just say that you're going to have a wedding, and you have this aunt who lives in England. Okay, and she doesn't have a large means, so there's no way she's going to be able to come to the wedding. But you want to send her an invitation anyway to honor her because you love her. She was like a big part of your life. And I says, now if you're doing this so you get a present from her, that's a whole different deal. But if you're just sending her the invitation to know we would love you to be included. Okay. If she shows up to your wedding, are you going to be offended? No. Why? Because you sent her an invitation. You didn't expect her to come. But she came. He says, now we don't normally send disinvitations, but if you send her a letter and say, whatever you do, you don't come to my stinking wedding, okay? I don't want you there. What happens if she shows up? That's the contraceptive mentality. You're basically telling God you don't want the child.
Well, it's even
Without, I mean, again, if you don't want a child, it's easy because you don't do anything.
You're also telling God you don't want to create with him.
Procreation, yeah.
You don't want him, basically.
You basically tell him to butt out. I mean, that's the crudest way I can say it. You're telling God to butt out of your sex life until we're ready to call you back in. And there are other implications of, I'm not even going to get into the medical stuff of birth control and the techniques that are used and the rest of the stuff. At least with natural family planning, there's no chemicals involved.
Yep.
All it is you learn to read her cycle. Now, one of the reasons we have 7 kids is she's got a very irregular cycle. She can double ovulate like a champ. So she'll go through ovulation and then ovulate again. And it's like, oh, well, here we go. But I was still very much contraceptive mentality for a very long time. You know, and that was killing our marriage. And when I finally surrendered and I says, okay, thy will be done. And it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to give me another child, for heaven's sakes, make it possible for me to feed them. Because it's hard. 7 kids on 1 income, it's hard. But it can be done. But all you have to do is without everything. All that stuff you can't live without, live without. So, you know, we raised a lot of our own food. We had a little small farm. I mean, I did all the work around it. I did all the construction. We used wood. I mean, it was just anytime we could scrape together something, then we did something. But we didn't take vacations. We didn't have a lot of stuff. My kids never seen Disneyland or Six Flags or anything else. In fact, they only saw Wonderland a couple of times because they had special deals that we could get in for $15. But I'm just saying that and it puts you outside. It puts you outside the whole culture.
So y'all were practicing natural family planning
From day one.
Yeah. And I can't remember what my question was now. How would y'all decide to have a child, or like would y'all like decide?
We almost, other than the first child, we sort of like happened. It was like, okay, I just don't care tonight, so let's see what happens. You know, that type of deal.
He's not usually a risk taker.
I was not. Let's just say that my iron will self-control was sometimes lacking. And you know, but the thing is when I accepted the consequences, then my children didn't bother me. Beforehand, they did. I was very upset with the second child when she got, after we had our first, about 6 months later.
9 months later.
9 months later, she was pregnant again. And I was mad at her. Well, I'm sorry, but I was the one not paying attention to her chart. She was charting. But I wanted what I wanted, you know, and so I ended up with a baby and I blamed her for it. It's irrational in me. And it was hard, it was hurting our marriage. It was really hurting our marriage.
But there's also a woman's body throws out pheromones.
There's things you see called pheromones when she goes fertile. And oh my gosh, she's attractive.
Yeah.
And you're sleeping next to her at night.
After I was 30, the only time I was really attractive was when I was fertile.
But see, even one of our daughters, she said she noticed that when she picked up stuff. We didn't teach her NFP.
I did.
But she kind of,
That was part of homeschool.
Was it part of it? Anyway, okay, teaching the female cycle and how it works. But anyway, she goes, Mom, and she was working at BSA in nutrition, carrying the trays of food around. She goes, Mom, when I'm fertile, I mean, it's like everybody's hitting on me. The whole hospital, doctors, you know, the technicians, everybody. She's like, you getting
She says, I walk into the elevator, everybody says, hi.
Do you think it's better for a Catholic couple to not practice natural family planning or to practice?
Okay, I'm going to tell you what the church teaches is if you have grave reason,
then you can practice it.
Then you should practice it.
And there's 4 reasons, and then you have to meet 2 additional conditions. No, it's not really that. They leave the grave reason understanding more or less to you, but it's pretty much can be economic, health, just the overall stress of having too many kids already and they're too young, you know, spacing. But again, this is from counseling and then my own stupid stuff. But how do you define grave reason? If you can't keep it in your pants, it's probably not a grave enough reason. Now, she's had many miscarriages. And she miscarried twins when she was out of town and nearly bled to death before she got home.
and she was recovering for a year from that. And her doctor basically says, one more pregnancy, you're done. Because your body, she has a bleeding condition, okay? It's called von Willebrand syndrome. It's like hemophilia. It's like hemophilia light. So some days you have it and other days you don't. So she can like bump her knee against the counter and just get a huge bruise. And then other times it's nothing. But because of this, because of the loss, and it was twins, because of that loss and the damage it did, and she was just like this far from sepsis in the uterus, which would have probably been fatal. And he estimated she lost 2 pints of blood, 2 to 3 pints of blood. So she was a ghost. When she got off the airplane, she was a freaking ghost.
I had to have my 3-year-old carry my purse because it was too heavy.
Yeah. So anyway.
How many
And my
pints do
kids
people
came
have?
down and helped me
8.
up the stairs.
Yeah,
It was bad.
2 to 3. She was severely anemic, and the recovery from that. But he basically said, okay, if she gets pregnant again and loses the baby, unless she's like in the hospital, and can get an IV right away, you probably will not be able to get her in fast enough because she will bleed out so fast. And that's grave reason. And from that time, I had no trouble controlling myself because I don't want to kill her. For me to have my jollies and risk her life is just beyond nuts. It's beyond nuts. It's nothing I couldn't even conceive of it. So I had to grow up all of a sudden at 50 years old, But like I said, that's grave reason. Now we had economic stuff and all that was kind of borderline, but it's like I don't know how. I still don't to this day know how we did it, but we got through it.
Well, there's this thing that, I always said, God will provide.
Yeah.
God will provide. And he's going, God will not provide. I said, God will provide. And so he was working out at Pantex, and they came up with this thing. We'll give you $10,000 to quit.
$15,000
to quit.
Oh.
And so,
Yeah, so I quit.
God will provide.
I've never had anybody pay me to quit. Oh, I'll quit. Yeah, sure, I'll quit. Well, I
would have done it for $1,000.
Well, I said I didn't ask for it, but they said, "Oh yeah, we need to reduce our." Well, so we'll get. I will. I said, well, you're not. It was supposed to be for the guys. They're going to retire. And well, you're not going to retire. Well, I'll retire if you want me to, and then I'll go back to work later. But nobody ever paid me money to quit a job, and I didn't really like the job anyway. It was the best job I ever hated. It was the easiest job. It
came home every night at the same time.
She loved it
I
so
loved
much.
it.
Vacation, medical, all the whole 9 yards, but it was eating my soul. It was eating my soul out there. And I don't know how to describe it. Anybody who's been out there knows what I'm talking about. But it just eats you. Yes.
It's 9 o'clock here.
Did you have any moral problems
Working there? You talking about with the nuclear weapons or whatever? No, because we were disassembling when I worked there. We're taking everything down. We're making it smaller and smaller and smaller. Immoral in ways of, well, let's put it this way. I viewed Pantex as institutionalized sloth and envy. If anybody's making a nickel more than you, or you're making a nickel more than somebody else, they are absolutely beside themselves with just disgust at that. It was incredible. And yet, the joke out there was how many people work at Pantex? About 20%. It's just, you spend so much time doing nothing by the way it's set up, because you just do nothing all day long because you've got all these procedures and all these signatures and all these people and nobody's around, and you just run around in circles all day long.
Kind of place where it takes like a week for someone to reply to an email?
Yeah, a little bit like that, but for me, I was a mechanic, okay? to grease 2 bearings and change 1 belt on an exhaust fan in an equipment room, not in a bay, in an equipment room, took 6 to 8 hours. And yet, out here, the job would take 15 minutes. I mean, it's just that crazy. Maybe more than 15 minutes because you got to get the belt. But, you know, still, it was just everything. Of course, part of it was security. It's outside. You got to wait for a guard. You can't just pop a door open. You know, then they got to let you back in. Yeah, she wants to say, good, go home, go home. But it just, that, all that, nothing. I was just rusting. I mean, my skills were just rusting. And I didn't like it. Now, I was working nuts before I went out there. So it was heaven on earth for 2 years. You know, it was. And then, the next year or two, it was just like starting to mend that. Last year, I was out there just 5 years. My last year, it was just to grind every day. In fact, I went to swing shift just to get away from the stupidness of the day shift.
Would you say it's immoral now?
I don't know about immoral, but it is a challenge. Of course, everything in the world can be seen as immoral. Mm-hmm. There's stuff I do now, well, I don't do it anymore because I don't work for him. I did for a guy that there was much stuff, I just refused to do it. And he would get upset with me. And I says, I'm just not going to do it. Why not? Everybody else does it. I'm not going to do it. I said, if you want to do it, go ahead. I'm not going to do it.
I was fixing the air conditioner stripper bar.
Can't tell you how many stripper bars I had to work in my job. Some on Saturday night while the show's going on, or ice machines. Yeah, it was an interesting job. That's all I can say. But boy, that went a rabbit hole in a big hurry, Mom. Yeah. So yeah, there was an immorality out there in the just the sloth and the envy. And I just tried not to play a part of it. I just tried to stay out of it. And as a result, I was a loner. That's where I did most of my reading. That's where I did most of my reading. Because like when I'm waiting for a guard, I just pop something out and start reading it. I was sitting in my little maintenance car until they can open up the door and I can go up outside. And sometimes it'd be 15, 20, 30 minutes before they could get there. You just never knew. And the same thing coming back in again. So it was just, it happened all the time. I'd take my breaks, I wouldn't go up to the break room with everybody else. I'd just sit in the shop and I'd read in the shop. So, that's where I did 90%. I think I read through the Bible 3 times, front to back, along with reading, the papal encyclicals. So I had a very productive 5 years. So we really need to go, guys. So
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing prayer, dear.
Oh, okay. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, thank you for your love. Help us to understand your love, to live your love, to make it a part of our hearts, part of our minds, bring it into our souls. Pour your Spirit into us. And in so doing, go out to others and show your love to them. We pray this in your most holy name. Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is it for this year, right? For this semester. So next, after break, we'll pick up again. At some date that Stephanie will tell me.